Okay, Peter, today I just wanted to talk about, in light of a lot of the stuff that's going on, when it's best to just admit defeat rather than make excuses. Now, a lot of people might be tying that up to different things that happen in the States, but I wanted to talk about that in the context of Deontay Wilder popping his head above the parapet again this week, and coming out with quite a bizarre rant, because we know that, obviously in that first fight 8 months ago, in 2019, Wilder was quite gracious in defeat in the immediate aftermath of the defeat by Tyson Fury. But then very quickly, within a few hours, he started to change, and he started to say, listen, the suit was too heavy that I was walking to the ring in. The suit was too heavy. It was 40 pounds. I did it especially for Black History Month, and it sapped the power of my legs. So there was that. And then there was, he obviously sacked Breland for throwing the towel in. And, so there was some sort of consternation. Then there was some sort of vague accusations of Fury's gloves being half on, half off, which I think we've discussed before. I can't see how that could give you any advantage. And then Wilder went quiet, as we've talked before on this show, and we've done that, the special Where's Wilder? So he went quiet, and then just this weekend, he's popped up again. And he made a little video on his Instagram feed where he basically said that he sacked Breland again, by the way, in the interim. He reinstated Breland, which again seemed to be a bit of a magnanimous acceptance of the defeat rather than looking for put blame somewhere. And then he reinstated Breland, so that all looked good. But then he sacked Breland again, and he put a sort of quite bizarre video basically accusing Tyson Fury of having loaded gloves. And then he doubled down on these accusations in an interview he did as well, where he said that not only was his water spiked, he said it was probably spiked with a muscle relaxant, so Rohypnol or something like that, by Breland during the fight. Breland was in on the conspiracy, and Wilder said, actually, I was getting myself back together in the 7th, and Breland obviously saw that and threw the towel in. It seems a bit delusional, because I was watching that fight. He didn't look like a man getting himself together. He looked like a man on the edge of getting seriously hurt. And I thought it was a great call by Breland, the right call to let his man come again. So anyway, so Fury said all that. He repeated the loaded gloves accusations, which again is difficult to imagine, because somebody from Wilder's camp would have been in Fury's dressing room watching the rapping, as would somebody from the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So these seem quite baseless accusations, and he really went off on it. And he called Fury out and said he would spit on his gravestone and he'd better order a coffin and all this stuff, kind of distasteful stuff that he says. But the contractual obligation to box Fury again has passed. So, he's had 8 months to do this. I know it's been difficult with the pandemic, but, the contractual obligation has now passed, which is why Team Fury have said, look, we're moving on. We'll fight him again sometime in the future if he wants, but we're moving on. So now all the talk is Fury Joshua after they get their respective opponents out of the way in December. Coming up early next year. So, why Wilder's come up now and made these increasingly bizarre accusations? I mean, the only thing I would say, as a sort of COD psychologist, is that it seems that anybody in the Wilder camp that doesn't agree with Wilder just gets thrown under the bus. And that's a difficult position to be in if you're Wilder. You're believing these rumours because nobody's contradicting you and saying, look, you should take it on the chin, son. So anyway, I thought it would be appropriate to have a little look back for a bit of fun, Peter, at some of the Wilder excuses in boxing we've had over the years. There's been some really fun ones. So I thought I'd just go back through history for a little bit. And the first one I thought I'd stop at is 2011, is Toegate. So I don't know who remembers that, but David Haye fought Vladimir Klitschko in 2011 for the undisputed heavyweight championship of the world. Haye talked it up brilliantly, what he was going to do to Klitschko and how he was going to destroy Klitschko. And obviously Haye was a great revelation on the heavyweight scene. Very exciting, fast, small heavyweight. And he held the WBA crown, which he'd got from the giant Valuev. And so obviously Klitschko wanted to unify. So finally this unification fight came around in 2011. It was massive, but I think I can summarise the fight by saying Haye couldn't really get past Vladimir's jab. He was never really looked like he was going to threaten Vladimir. It wasn't a hugely exciting fight, but he was the clear loser in that fight. And at the press conference afterwards, unfortunately, Haye, instead of saying, look, I got beaten by the better man on the night, said I broke my little toe on my right foot, and so I couldn't get any purchase in my punches. So that was why I lost, and that was why I wasn't throwing the right hand that I said I was going to knock him out with. And the press were a little bit like, really? And so then Haye kind of compounded it and doubled down on it by jumping on the table, taking his shoe off and showing his sore little toe, which didn't really get him any fans. I wonder if that played into David's later, when he was fighting Bellew. He was incredibly brave. He was a very brave fighter. He was a really courageous fighter anyway. And he was unfairly, in a way, tarred with this Toegate thing. And, when he fought Bellew, obviously his hamstring snapped. He should have been pulled out of the fight. You can't fight with one leg. but he insisted on carrying on and carrying on and carrying on until it stopped. I wonder if that was him saying, look at me, I am a warrior, I'm going out on my shield. And, you know, maybe he would have been more sensible if it hadn't been for Toegate. So that was 2011. One of the more bizarre excuses I found as well, going back to 2005. Now, Roy Jones had in 2003, we all remember, had that stellar run, gone up and won a portion of the world heavyweight title. Then he dropped back to light heavyweight and fought Antonio Tarver. Lost to Antonio Tarver on points. It was quite controversial. Most people thought Tarver had won, and Jones was having an off night. Then he boxed Tarver again and got stopped. And this, everybody was like, oh my God, you know, Jones has been stopped. And this was obviously the start really of what we might term as Jones's decline. Then he fought Tarver for a third time. And this time he lost again. He lost on points. But this time he recruited his father, his sort of estranged father, who brought Roy up and taught Roy how to box. Then they had a very fractious relationship and he broke up with him. He brought his dad back into the camp. So for this fight, the third fight with Tarver in 2005, Roy Jones Sr. was in the corner. At the press conference afterwards, when they said, Roy, you lost again on points to Tarver, you know, what do you feel the reasons for the loss? He said, well, I kind of lost deliberately. He said, because I brought my dad back into the camp. Halfway through the fight, I realised that it was a mistake. And I really don't like my dad. And I didn't want my dad to get any credit for me winning. So I decided not to win. So that seemed quite a bizarre one. And then if we hop back again, go back a little bit through boxing history, there's a very famous fight, you know, George Foreman against Muhammad Ali in Zaire. When Foreman was the champion, the seemingly unassailable, gigantic, monstrous champion against Ali, you know, at 32, you know, who had been beaten by the likes of Norton and Frazier and so on at this point. And so it was seen as a bit of a suicide mission for Ali. He did win the fight incredibly, you know, and he won with a KO in the 8th round. Now, Foreman found it very difficult, a bit like Wilder is now, a similar sort of devastating puncher who just got rid of everyone and then all of a sudden got beat like this, you know, properly beat. And, you know, people were saying, well, how can this happen? And Foreman had a very difficult time to adjust into this. Now, the excuses were manifold in this fight. The most obvious one was the ropes are too loose. So the ropes were loosened in the fight, allowing Ali to lean back and do the rope-a-dope. There was also the excuse that his shoes were too big. There was an excuse that there was wilder excuses that there'd been a West African witch doctor who had cast a spell on Foreman and sent what they called a succubus, which takes your energy away and caused Foreman to get so tired in that fight. And Dick Sadler, Foreman's, you know, esteemed trainer and the ex-world champion himself, kind of bought into this and said, do you know what? I think that's true because Foreman can fight like that all night. And all of a sudden he's tired after 8 rounds of that. What's going on? So then they were talking about spiked water, and these excuses were going on with Foreman, you know, a lot. In 1990, Foreman came out with what I think was the most bizarre excuse, was that he was boxing Ali and beating Ali handily in the early few rounds. He looked out into the crowd in about round 4, and he saw one of his friends cheering Ali, and this discombobulated him so much to think of this betrayal from one of his good friends that he couldn't concentrate, and that meant Ali caught him on the hop and knocked him out in the 8th round. It's got to be said that Foreman did then reconcile himself to this defeat and said, look, the better man won on the night, and that's that. And, you know, obviously, you know, managed to get over that psychological hurdle and deal with it. Now, another excuse, we're going to come to my favourite now. We've got to go back to 1932 for this, for one of my favourite characters, colourful characters in the world of boxing. This guy didn't actually lose his fight. This was two-ton Tony Galento. And in 1932, he fought a guy called Arthur Decoux, okay? And Galento, you know, Decoux was like a lot of these guys. Galento was 5'9", barrel shaped, came in about 107 kgs for all his fight. Said he trained on beer and pretzels, never ran. You know, just a vicious, hard brawler. And he was a bit, in a way, like a gatekeeper heavyweight. He was a bit like Derek Chisora is today. You know, he's not going to be the top dog, but to be the top dog, you have to beat him. So, you know, he fought a lot of really top guys, and only the top guys could beat him. Anyway, he fought Arthur Decoux, 6'3", very good looking guy. Decent fighter. And for the first 3 rounds, Tony was really sluggish. Didn't get going, you know, was taking some shots from Decoux. And then in the 4th round, all of a sudden, he seemed to find his feet, you know, move around a little bit and knock Decoux out with a left hook. And they said to him afterwards, Tony, you were very sluggish in the first 3 rounds, and we thought you were gonna lose that fight. And he said, yeah, well, I had a bet before the fight that I couldn't eat 52 hot dogs before the fight. So in his dressing room, and this is all true, you know, this is verified. In his dressing room before the Decoux fight, two-ton Tony Galento ate 52 hot dogs. They couldn't get his shorts on him because his waistline has expanded so much. They had to cut his shorts to get him in. And Tony said this was the excuse as to why he was a bit sluggish rounds 1 to 3. But when they kind of went down, he turned it on and got the coup out of there. That is my favourite excuse. And I'd say to anyone that's interested in colourful characters in boxing, if you don't know him, look up two-time Tony Galento. Even the Wikipedia entries are just phenomenal. Your eyes will be popping out of your head at the stuff this guy used to get up to. And incidentally, ran Joe Lewis very close in 39. I mean, Lewis knocked him out in 4, but he staggered Lewis in the first round. In the third round, he knocked Lewis down. And a few of the scribes at the ringside were just agape, saying, looking up at Tony Galento, said, two-time Tony Galento looks in this second like he's going to be heavyweight champion of the world. And he did say, though, because he took the Lewis fight seriously, that he'd laid off alcohol for 2 days. So maybe that was why he managed to get that. So anyway, 2 times. So those are various excuses that have come through the realm of boxing. Now, we'll jump back a bit to 1985. And this is an excuse that was never said. And I think this kind of underlines the greatness and character of the man involved. So Hagler Hearns, 1985, Caesars Palace, Las Vegas. Everybody knows about it. They built it as the war, and it turned into such. Often cited, quite rightly, I think, as one of the greatest first rounds in boxing, or one of the greatest rounds in boxing. That first round between Hagler and Hearns was phenomenal. But what happened at the end of the first round, because Tommy had been throwing that long straight right hand that he threw all the time onto Marvin's head over and over and over and over again in that round, and Hagler just gritted his teeth and kept moving forward. Tommy broke his hand and went back to the stool at the end of round 1 and said to Emmanuel Stewart, I've broken my right hand. So Stewart said, right, well, let's get up and box, use the jab and move. And so the fight, when people say it's the greatest fight, it's the greatest round. The next 2 rounds, it was a bit of a fait accompli. Apart from the fact that Hagler got cut in the third, you kind of saw which way it was going. But the first round was unbelievable. Anyway, after the fight, so Hearns was stopped in round 3 by Hagler. And after the fight at the press conference, obviously everybody was saying, well, what happened? You looked a bit, it was really what was going to, you change your tactics in round 2, et cetera, et cetera. What was that all about? And Emmanuel Stewart wanted to say, so I want to tell him, Tommy, I want to tell him you broke your hand in round 2. And Tommy Hearns said to Emmanuel Stewart, no, this is Hagler's night. Hagler won. That's it. We say nothing. And that only came out years and years later. So that's, a very valid, legitimate excuse that the man chose not to use because, as he said, it's Hagler's night. So, maybe Deontay could do with listening to that a bit, taking it on the chin and moving on. But yeah, I thought some interesting excuses. Sometimes it's better to say the better man won on the night and move on and regroup. So that was just, that was my 2 pence worth, Peter. I looked this morning because I got the countdown clock going on the KO Cup, and I had a little look. 96 days to the next Rumble. Fantastic feedback from that. Amazing viewing figures. So 96 days to the next Rumble. Can't wait.